Let me introduce the speaker. Todd Barton is a senior system engineer at Data Gravity, working with partners and customers focused on changing the paradigm of IT. Todd has extensive experience in solution architectures, channel development, and evangelizing modernization of data centers at major conferences such as VMworld. At Texan, Todd most recently worked for Dell and previously worked for Equal Logic and Virtual Iron Software. Todd, you can find Todd on Twitter at Virtualocracy. Todd studied history, politics, and architecture at the University of London, as well as business administration with major in finance at the University of Texas at Arlington. Over 15 years career, Todd have worked in all three capacities of IT as a customer supporting end user, solution provider, architecting and implementing solutions, and manufacturer focused on delivering the solutions providers and customers require. His specialties are data center technologies, storage, virtualization, developing and evangelizing technical presentations, team building, communications, enabling partners and customers. Please help me welcome our next speaker, Todd Barton.
Thank you. Thank you. And let's not forget a Texas Rangers fan, right? So it is the last sessions of the last day of the conference. So let's hit our home runs since we're in the theme of baseball. So thank you for the introduction. I hope we'll have some fun and interesting conversation around this, because this is probably a shift in the focus when you think about security. I'm sure there's been tons of conversation, good dialogue around the idea of governance and visibility and security around data. And we're going to think about this problem perhaps in an area that you may not expect. So before we get into this, I want to have you just sort of think about 3 questions to internally, or you can shout them out if you know the answers. As you identify the problem in trying to govern and secure data, the first thing you must ask yourself is, what do you really know about your data? And when you really break that down, is where is it located? And what is the content of that data? It's those two what and wheres. There's a whole lot of other W's that come into mind, but those two especially surface. The second one is almost, it's a layup. It's, do you have in your organization or in your environment, do you have sensitive information that requires compliance? Of course you do. It's just a matter of what type of compliance is there. And then the third one is, how does your current storage, the place, the container of this data, how does it help you understand this problem, understand data? And it's this last area, this third question, and we've gone back to 1. We're changing the math here. The third question here that is really where we're going to focus in today. And so we know the problem. The problem begins with geometric data growth. I am originally from the infrastructure world, and you and your peers at the various organizations you work in or work with, you keep creating data. And you keep creating with the devices that we provide to you, whether it's from normal laptops or it's your mobile devices or tablets or whatnot. We're creating data at an alarming rate, and we know less and less about this data. And so what's interesting is most organizations, and you see this study here, most organizations simply don't even know where it resides. In fact, this part of this study, 93% of all organizations simply do not know where their unstructured data resides. And we're going to focus a little bit on the unstructured data here. And so if you don't know where it is primarily, then you really can't even begin to address the issue of security. And so kind of drilling down a little bit further into human-generated data, right? The PDFs, the Word documents, the Excel spreadsheets, all of these types of files, which tend to live in files and folders and are easily transportable, this is the area in which content becomes more difficult, sensitive content especially, becomes more difficult to gain visibility. And so Even in environments where I've talked to customers and organizations where it's a largely structured world in databases, at some point those workloads tend to create CSVs or spreadsheets or PDF reporting, and then at that point it's sort of out into the wild. It becomes part of the ghost IT. And so where we, of course, are all trying to gain better visibility is the scenario here. Where is that hidden Social Security number? Where is that hidden list of credit card numbers? Whatever is considered sensitive. And so again, we go back to, if you don't know where it is, how can you begin to find the sensitive content? Now, to kind of step away from the data problem and just looking at the way data is managed today, let's kind of focus in on a couple of trends that are emerging. The first one is that we touched based on the first one, which is that human-generated data growth is, there's no end in sight, and there is no insight into that data. So it's growing, and we don't know what's inside of it. Now that we have shadow IT in the form of things like Dropbox, Google Drive, the flow of data in and out of secure environments or organization to organization or to people or business to business makes it an even more daunting task. And so there is a high degree of security in this data built in when organizations deploy these techniques. The third thing that we're noticing is cloud is not ubiquitous. It is more adopted. I'm seeing, of course, adoption in that where it makes sense. But there is still the concern around cloud and public cloud solutions where the sensitivity of data still is, they're not quite sure whether or not they want to put it into those spaces. And so people are really rethinking that, and they're bringing it back into their four walls. Now, from an infrastructure side, what we're seeing is collapsing of silos. And so the world that I used to work in, where you had disparate solutions around storage area networks, NAS devices, backups, and archives, what we're tending to see is that the technology has matured to a point where these technologies can be collapsed together, and the end result is that organizations are much more efficient. They can have one sort of expert operate all three of these tiers because it's self-automated. The backup and the archive data can be managed by the same person who's carving up primary storage. Not always, but we're seeing more of that. And then the last thing that we're seeing is that these systems being more sophisticated because increased resources in compute and flash memory and automation and alerting is that the IT professionals are now seeking better intelligence about how data is flowing in and out of these, if you will, sheet metal boxes. And so we're at the point in the industry where these boxes are able to give the types of insights that typically security personnel would like. And so when we step back into the data discussion, of course, we then ask, what are the crown jewels? Everyone has data. Everyone can identify some sort of sensitive data, regardless if they're a public entity, whether they're a private company or a university. Everyone has employee data. Social Security numbers can be found there. There is the customer data, which we're all sensitive of. There's proprietary, there's intellectual property, trade secrets. We all have some sort of data that are the crown jewels. And so we all then, therefore, know the consequences, hopefully, of what happens when this data gets out into the wild. It's not good. It's pretty ugly. And so we ask the question, what are the risks and what are your risks? And so the news isn't very good, unfortunately, right? Data loss is inevitable. We have seen it in the news almost on a weekly basis. If you get Google alerts on breaches, your Google alerts is filled almost every day. And it's not just the well-known companies that you see up here. You know, the famous ones, the Sony hacks, the Anthem, the Home Depots, and the Targets. Those all make Google news. They're fun. They're sexy stories. They're fun to go investigate. But most of these breaches and these data losses occur in the mid-market, in smaller organizations, in in smaller environments. And for example, Sally's beauty supplies here locally, they were breached. In fact, the study that we follow, 57% of all companies, American companies, over the last year have had some sort of breach or data loss. So we all face this problem. Now, it's not always from the Chinese or the Russians or a fellow student hacker or something like that, the curious, the anonymous groups. It's typically from within. And so, for example, in a malware instance, Cryptolocker, anybody but face Cryptolocker? Anybody had that happen? Yes. That's a great day, isn't it? Ransomware, right? You see the numbers listed up here of people who have been impacted by ransomware. It's almost on a weekly basis when I get to talk to our customers. They've had this particular issue. And then at the bottom, like I said, most of these breaches, these data losses occur from within, whether through negligence, which is typically the case, or it could be some malicious behavior. And so I'm just full of good news, aren't I? So it can and will happen to you. So regardless of your industry, the vertical, if you will, that you work in, whether you're in finance or retail, commercial business, healthcare, education, state and local government, you can build a 10-foot fence around your environment, and we will bring a 12-foot ladder. So at the end of the day, we all have to deal with this problem. It is, unfortunately, a reality. And of course, listed right there in bullet point form are all the great news that can happen when you are facing these breaches. There are the audits that you have to go through, the fines when you fail these audits, the analysis, the ongoing analysis, there is the ongoing reporting, then the notification if there is an anomaly in the data. If there is a breach, if you're dealing with safe harbor laws, then you're also requiring to notify customers that are impacted, which then results in tarnishment of the brand, loss of reputation. The whole society just collapses, right? We're at the zombie apocalypse at this point. So we know that this is all gloom and doom, right? Now, what's startling is that when I go visit a lot of organizations, they simply do not even understand the basic risks. And it's great that conferences like this are here to evangelize and educate and let organizations of all sizes that they really do face some problems here. And if you boil it down to its least common denominator, it's all about the 5 W's. Knowing what's in your data, how it's being used, and then again asking what data do you have? Where is it? Where's the location? Who has access to it? Why are they accessing it? And when did they access it? If we can begin to ask and answer these questions, we start at least on the path of recovery. And then that only goes so far. It's fully being able to understand what the risk is. It's what's above water that we can at least know what we're dealing with. But I think it was what Donald Rumsfeld that said there are known knowns and there are known unknowns, and then there are the unknown unknowns. So it's what's beneath the waterline that will tend to be the ones that get us. So we have to educate, we have to learn, we have to then explore every nook and cranny when it comes to our organization's data. And so to the rescue is compliance and security standards, right? Now, this is just a mountain of work, and it's very tedious, it's very expensive to be in compliance. So it's likely that the organization that you work with or you work at is facing some of these alphabet soups. And so, of course, there are tenets involved in this approach. The first one is to find and protect the sensitive data, and then provide the audit activity and forensics. But even with that in place, for those of you that are dealing with this issue on a day-to-day basis, you know the challenges that are involved. First of all, you have to be able to understand and interpret the policies which are always changing. That is a task in and of itself, just being able to interpret the law, interpret the regulation. Second is then training your users in that organization. A very wise security officer that I worked with, he said the only way you can really do this is firewall, but you can't firewall stupid. And that is absolutely true. We're only as good as that weakest link within the organization. So as soon as that person clicks the Cryptolocker infected email, we've just impacted the entire organization. At that point, where we have ongoing assessments, there, of course, is the ongoing monitoring. When you have issues, there's the remediation process, and then finally, the reporting side. So again, it doesn't get easier. In fact, it gets more complicated, more expensive once you have regulation in effect. So now to more better news, or at least the transition. When we often think of security, we often think about protecting the edge, right? IPS, we have firewalls, we have antivirus, those kind of techniques. And then we have user authentication. But it's very interesting as you get closer to the center of the target here, the gooier, the softer the security becomes. And this is where it's kind of interesting because this data tends to reside on some sort of storage. We come back to this point finally. This data resides in some sort of storage container. And if you have AD authentication or some sort of authentication granted to you, you now have access to this storage and the data there resides. And so without the proper insights about who is coming in and out, an authenticated user can simply walk out with this data on a thumb drive or some other device or simply copy it accidentally in from a secure share into an unsecure share. We see this all the time. So the point here is that this needs to be a holistic approach, that all layers need to be fortified, even the center square. And so the best way to do this, to accomplish this, is to become data aware. And data aware simply is being able to ask and answer the 5 W's, the who, what, when, and where. And this is where the company that I work for, we're coming up with a unique approach of this data awareness at the point of storage. And so this is the area we're going to look at. Now, there are 2 actual approaches to doing this, right? And if you look at, this is a traditional infrastructure that I see today. Regardless of the size of the organization, you can basically boil it down into there is primary block storage, and then there is primary file storage. And some people have unified these platforms together. But then organizations dump their data inside of them, and this could be in the physical world with physical servers, but more often the case, people have virtualized their workloads. And so this lives in a virtual container, which, by the way, virtualization makes these workloads instantly transportable across your data center. That makes it even more challenging. So now that I put my data inside of this construct, and I then want to be able to search the contents, and I want to monitor activity, I then stand up an infrastructure layer around that to accomplish this. So I put a search server of some type. I then put an auditing server monitoring access in and out, requiring a database. And then at this point, I can run my system scans. This is all well and good. I can get the reporting that I need from this capability. Now, there's some advantage of this approach. It's a la carte. I can pick what I need when I need it, depending on who needs that solution. And it can scan across the data center where and when I want it. But look at where these pieces lie. They're at distance. They're outside of where the data actually lives, right? It's kind of like buying a house, filling it with contents, and then walking across the street and looking at the house with binoculars to try to describe the internals. So the challenge of this is that it can be expensive. I'm having to stand up people and personnel to support the infrastructure around the storage, around the data. Typically, when I run scans, it's very rare that I find people who do this during production time. It's usually done at night or over weekends because of the impact to the network and the storage. It is an install and crawl type of approach. So I am very good at reporting what happened yesterday. I can give you an CISO, here's the report that the thief came into the jewelry store and took the jewels yesterday. And so this is good. Perhaps that's not good enough. So how do we make this more real time? Our approach is to make the storage platform itself data aware. So these same actions, these same capabilities that one would expect from disparate solutions standing outside of the house of the data, why not collapse them into the storage platform itself? And what is allowing us to do this is modern technology. It's the resources now that we can put inside of our storage array to effectively drive this insights right back to the business and put it in the hands of those who need it. Okay? So I can now get near real-time analytics because as I'm doing normal file copy and read of files, as I'm moving in and out of virtual machines, as I'm writing data, reading data, I am at the same time inspecting the who, the what, the when, the where, and the why. It's just a natural process all in one. I can do this and even coexist with existing storage that's already on-prem. Since I'm doing this in part of a redesign of the architecture, I'm no longer impacting storage constructs or the networking layers. I'm also collapsing everything into an appliance form, so it's lower cost of ownership. And I'm doing this with frankly, a what would Steve Jobs do approach, right? Steve Jobs wants us to, or did want us to be able to operate the entire Apple world with one device. And so we want to be able to drive that sort of usability into this platform. And so therefore, we can reduce the amount of staff needed because it's all inherent within normal workloads. And just to give you a proof point, every one of our customers, we found sensitive information. We always find something. And in a lot of cases, it's not a surprise. What can be a surprise is what we actually find in their environments. It can be quite disturbing sometimes, frankly, but this is the kind of guarantees that are there. So let me kind of walk you through a bit of an architecture. At the bottom layer is part of the infrastructure, or rather at the baseline, sort of build up, it's primary storage. I know there may not be a lot of infrastructure guys in the room, but this is where you store your data. It's a unified hybrid-based approach, so we're using flash technology, and we do file and block protocol. And by the way, this approach, everything is built in. You turn it on, and all these forensics and auditing and search capabilities are there. It's inherent in the product. As I ingest data, as people write their data into my system, I immediately begin to index it. And I am looking at the MFT properties, if you will, and I'm looking at what the file actually contains, and then I'm comparing that to a catalog that I have built into the system. And depending on that file type, I will then begin to crack the file. That's a technical term. I'll crack the file, and I'll begin to look inside of the contents. I'll look at the headers. I will look at the actual text. I'm actually deploying text analytics at this stage, and I'm looking for the patterns that you find interesting to your business. You tell me the pattern you're looking for, and I will find it for you. Once I'm done indexing it, I can now search it. I can now search on any key term, any author, any time, any date, any title of the file. This becomes a Google search type experience. Now, at the same time, I'm also doing real-time analytics on the audit trail. Because you wrote the data, I have your digital identity. I have your UID or your AD credentials. I know who you are, and I know what you did, and I know when you did it. That simply becomes an audit trail to us. And then the last piece, I simply am protecting this in the architecture in a way so that when malware events happen, I now know what good looked like the minute before, and I can return you to that state of good immediately after Decrypt has gone through and ransomed all your files. So we're providing storage, we're protecting it, we're searching and indexing it, and then we're giving you a full audit trail. And so at this point, you can ask yourself, how do you today answer these questions? How do you report when sensitive data is found inside of a share or inside of a virtual machine? And who has access to those shares in those virtual machines? So if you have an employee that's leaving the organization, wouldn't you like to know what he or she is doing in the 2 weeks prior to them leaving? We can spot the changes in behaviors, mass deletions, mass uploads, mass copies. Recovering from Cryptolocker, applying intelligence profiles and looking for well-defined patterns within the data, then finally alerting to those who need it. Okay? So what I want to do is do a quick change here. I'm actually going to show you this. I'm going to go from the Windows world to the Mac world. There we go. Let me do this. Brilliant. So what I'm actually doing here is I'm logging into a system. This is a virtual system. It's living on this laptop, okay? But this is what is noted as intelligent management. This is simply taking regular expressions to look for well-defined patterns within content, and then at this point, we can take that tag and apply it to a profile. Profiles are simply what you build across your business. So the system is designed to come with 9 predefined tags. It's the first 9 that you see, from Social Security numbers all the way down to US address. This comes built in. And we're actually, our data scientist teams from the text analytics world, let me give you a better one to look at. Let's look at phone numbers. As it turns out, creating tags is not simple. Regular expressions is not simple because you have the deal with false positives. And so being able to exclude the first 3 numbers of a 9-digit, looks like a Social Security number, and bounce that off, what is actually good. So ignoring what not good is. But anyway, this is the idea of looking at a phone number. And what we provide is a syntax highlight of what an actual phone number, for example, would actually appear in something that we would identify. Now, these first 9 are what comes built in. We obviously want to give people the ability to construct their own. And in the interest of time, we can build a very simple text highlight right here. So that's all built in. Now at this point, this tag capability can then be applied to whatever it is that is interesting to your business. So for example, when I work with universities, it's all about FERPA, right? Student IDs, class rosters, transcripts, and grades. And so we can apply a FERPA policy built on these 4 attributes. It's when I go to the company's public share that I want to look at everything. Anything that may be considered privileged. A public or home directories tend to be, it's almost like the shed you put in your backyard. All those people that live with you will fill that thing up. And so the public share is the same thing inside of a business. So sensitive information here, I've got everything that I've built and I'm applying it to this public share. And so now what I can do is start getting demographics back from my system. What you see at the top left is who is consuming my asset, my storage. And I'm doing that against Active Directory. So I'm showing you that Roger Sterling from Mad Men is consuming most of my storage. And then as we go down the list, more people or less people are consuming more storage. Underneath that, I'm showing you the activity level of the people inside of my primary storage array. What is interesting about this is we're using heuristics to inflate and deflate names. So as a user spins up more data or consumes more data, becomes more active, I will actually inflate their name. So if Edward Snowden begins to data dump, that name will begin to show up in the screen. Beneath that is dormant data, and dormant data is very interesting. This is the place where most organizations fail to really inspect because, hey, it's not been accessed, it's not been modified in a year, why investigate it? Well, if I drill down, for example, in a public share, I have the ability to then investigate all of the files that have not been, in this case, accessed in more than a year. It's almost 1,000 files. Small data set, local lab, but you get the point. Furthermore, what I have the ability to do through faceted navigation is to explore my tags that I've developed against this share, and now I have my list of social security numbers that's lived in this share for more than a year. This is one of the big gotchas. By the way, I can export this as a report, give it to my security officer, and we begin to remediate on this. This is all at the nanosecond this data begin to ingest itself within this array. Other demographics which may seem interesting, whenever I find myself in universities and schools, I know, or in secondary schools, I know when school starts because audios and videos go up to the right. It's because this is where they put their MP3s and Game of Thrones videos and everything else. I find everything in that space. I can show the file distribution by size. I can show categories of files, and then more importantly, now I'm starting to see those tags that we created begin to surface in these balloons. It's a little bit hard to see from the screen there, but typically red's not a good thing. So let's go look at a couple of credit cards. Now in this list, I have found credit card patterns based on an IBAN or LUN number. And we actually have an internal algorithm that actually compares against the MasterCard, Visa, Amex list to verify what good looks like. Now, a couple of these, looking at the names of the file, look pretty obvious, right? Called corporate credit cards. But this is the one that gets people. If you've got 100 million files inside of your environment, which one is the one that's that anonymous are you able to find? It's called presentation 2. So the one thing that we provide is the ability to inspect the file through a rendered object, giving me a preview. So here's an entire list of MasterCard files, syntax highlighted in red. And at this point, we have a problem. So I can then download this, assuming I have the right credentials, I'm the right role within the organization. I can take this over to my security officer, and what is that security officer going to say? What is the forensics? What has been our risk exposure since this file appeared? Here is that forensics. I am going to give you a full audit trail to this file, or the box is. I'll support the box. What this shows you is the full timeline of when the file appeared. In blue and green shows you the interaction from people who have just read it to those who've read it and changed the file, even if they've tried to change the properties or change the attributes or hide this file. I can give you, or rather the array, I keep saying I, the array can provide you that full interaction list. And of course, what that auditor wants to know is who created it? Who put it here? Where did this problem begin? In this case, we have 2 creators. That's telling me that someone created it, and then someone must have deleted it off, and then someone else created it again. So let's find out who did that. Well, actually, Ed did a good thing. Ed showed up and saw this file and saw that it needed to be removed from this public share. But then Roger came back, and he's a bad boy. He's put this file back on there. Curious, did Julian Assange read it? No, that's a good thing, right? But this idea of giving the full audit trail right at the point of storage, this is where it begins to emerge. This is more real time. This is more at the point of the event. Now, this is all well and good. These are positive things. But it's sort of like a CNN news report. You have to have the TV on to notice that this has happened, right? What we need is more proactive alerting, right? And so that becomes part of the workflow itself. You simply tell the system what you want to be alerted on, and it will tell you when these events have happened. So if you need to be notified that a credit card living in a public share inside of an encapsulated virtual machine just appeared, it will do that. If you want to know every Monday morning how many people dumped all their music files in your company's assets, it will do that. So it's designed to simply tell you when these events are happening. Now, we talked about Edward a while ago. I think he's an interesting use case. Anybody seen Citizen 4? Watch Citizen 4. It's interesting, especially the end. But if we want to know what Edward's been doing in the HR folder, we can determine that. We can see what he's been reading. We can see he's been writing. Let's see if he's been deleting. I get that full audit trail. Looks like he's just done a little bit of writing. Mainly it appears that he's done no reading. Let's see if he's gone into the public share. Yeah, this is where Ed tends to hang out. But if Edward turned in his 2-week notice, and by the way, his name began to inflate from 1 gig of data read and written per week to now 50 gig of data copied, that's something you'd probably want to be alerted on. Now, the last thing I want to show you is how you deal with Cryptolocker. So Cryptolocker is very interesting. It comes and goes. It has its own signature here and there. I will admit that our own company got impacted by Cryptolocker. Our time to recovery was about 6 minutes because our data lives in a system which takes versioning of the data from what good is and what changes are. And then once it begins, in our case, what happened, it was an executive opened up an email, a very top-end executive, and it began to go through and pilfer through engineering shares. It caused a lot of damage. But the damage that it created was noticed, and then what we did is simply look at the append of the file. In this case, Cryptolocker appends the file with decrypt, and then once you go into that share, you'll find something that says the instructions to overcoming, to get the keys to unencrypt it, which is paying the ransom, right? So you pay that in Bitcoins. Funny, the day that this happened, the guy who created Cryptolocker was arrested the same day, coincidentally. But for us, we didn't pay a ransom. We just simply went and typed in the word decrypt. Every file that was impacted was there. And all we had to do was hit a button that said recover back to the previous version, and life went on. So we had a cup of coffee, laughed about it, and got over it. I talked to a customer the other day who said that their outage, they were able to recover in 6 hours. For those that were impacted by that, I think you said how long did it take you to recover? 6 hours, yeah. I've met businesses who are in wealth management, managing billions of dollars, who said their recovery time was 6 days, and they were proud of that. Where's your 401k, right? And so, in our minds, that time to value it has to be measured in now, right? If you have kids, if the Xbox doesn't come on, it's broken, right? If I can't get my data, it's broken. And so we have to get it now. So this is just really, what I've given you is really just almost a cursory view of what we can do with this. There are so many different options and functions we can drive, but I think for this conference, this is appropriate. So by doing that, I get to fast forward through all these slides here. Just to give you a list of, instances, it's funny, we're in the business of helping customers, but we can't give their names. Nobody wants to know how they've been exposed, so we just describe it. So for a government agency in Florida, within 30 minutes, we found over 600 PII files. We were walked out of the room because we were in the middle of a breach that they were just now noticing, so we were walked out. The manufacturer that recovered from Cryptolocker was us. So we eat our own dog food, so to speak. The one about Dropbox is fairly interesting. this was a law firm in which the paralegal was let go. And so what she did was begin to put case files into Dropbox, Shadow IT, a personal Dropbox. And of course, the IT administrator was seeing this begin to flash up. Her patterns were changing. These case files were being massively copied from one location to the other. And so her bad day got really worse. We always find the admin, especially in the wealth management and the legal firms, these legacy engineering firms, these industries or these businesses that tend to be 25 to 30 plus years old. The admins basically have their executive staff's credit cards, and what do? They're tired of asking for the number, so they put it in a Word document, they store it as a Word document, and then one day they drag and drop it, and they accidentally moved it from their private link into a public share, and that's where they find it. We find Lego movies, we find MP3s, great if you can get away from it, but I don't know if that's a good use of company assets. So to kind of get to the end here, because I want everybody to have a nice weekend, and hopefully the Rangers are doing well. We think that data-aware storage is simple. It can be accomplished. It is at the point of zero. It is the origin of your data. This is the DNA of where data lives and resides. And so being able to accomplish the who, what, when, and where can be done. So those interested, we'd love for you to be 100% confident as well. Thank you. Appreciate it. Any questions? Yes. Yes. I guess we'll go back to, front. That's right. Yes. Thank you.
So you went over the data storage and everything, but do you have your own security team? Who protects the data being stored?
You do. Yeah, what this is it is a device that you can deploy into your environment, and then we give you the visibility and the tools so that you can manage this. So we are putting the alerts, we are putting these resources into your hands. Now, what a lot of our customers do is they will outsource that security side to perhaps a security partner, which we partner with, or consultants. What we are providing is the tools to begin that first step of the process. Okay? Yes? Actually, it's a great question. So everybody know encryption at data at rest, right? This has become the new, not even new, it's a must-have. The short answer is yes. We have to use our own keys. The way we are doing that is encryption at rest through a controller-based function. So you put in the secure passphrase, we'll encrypt it, and we'll still be able to decrypt and in text analytics and do the security audit trail, all that's built in. That architecture that I kind of just flew right by is, frankly, it's supersized controllers. I mean, they're really, really beefy that allow us to do this processing and not impact the primary storage. That's a key thing. This is the unique differentiator. If you try to take these techniques and apply it to brand X storage, I will bring it to its knees. They're not designed to do that. We frankly have designed it from zero to do this. Yes, sir.
We've got a number of applications that pump data in and out of our storage, either through SQL, through applications that are custom designed, where the user themselves are not what's requesting the data out of the storage, but they may be pulling the data like reports.
Right.
And then potentially storing them on a virtual environment or the local desktop.
Right.
And whatever we haven't locked down sufficiently. How does this help us in an environment like that? Is that a whole different case?
Yeah, so there's an edge case there. If these are system accounts that are probably doing these back-end processes, so we can see the system accounts coming in and out. Typically, in the database world, the structured environment, there's already business intelligent tools that can inspect from, from a row and table and all that kind of stuff. But from what the system account is doing, we can see that activity trail. And so where I've seen that particular use case applied is an auditor wants to make sure that some backdoor system account wasn't created and is maliciously taking another stream of data and putting it somewhere else. I've seen that in the finance world, right, where they're managing stock trades, intraday trading. And so they want to make sure that some sophisticated programmer didn't build a back-end systems account and say, hey, I need this set of data transactions to go over here.
But there's no like set of APIs or something that our developers could use to give some tie-in back to your application.
Right, yeah.
Because my concern is, I mean, and there's a lot of value, don't get me wrong, I'm trying to put it down. But my concern would be, again, somebody's using a third, one of these applications
Right.
to access the data, and they could be siphoning out a lot of that data that I wanted. I'm selling my management, but this is going to watch my data, my
Right.
infrastructure data, things like that.
Yeah.
And yet if it's coming out under a different set of credentials, I'm not going to have visibility.
Sure, yeah. So in that case, if the applications are living on us, then I can give them that visibility. In regards to the REST APIs, that actually is we're getting into a little bit of a future road mapping thing, but that part is coming so that we can sync into existing systems and be able to pull out that forensics information as well. Today, if that workload were just to live on us, all of that information, I may not be able to inspect the EDB or that particular application and give you much value there. However, I can, as I said, give you the activity trail, the system accounts coming in out of that workload. As long as that system is living on us. That's the key. Did I answer your question? Okay, great. Yes, sir. Now, internal today, yeah. Yeah. In that, let's see. So if you've dumped that, the file owner is going to, once it lands in the share, if the share is a different owner, yeah, you're still going to emerge as the owner then, yeah. That's correct. Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. Yeah. So today it is a single 6U appliance in which the capacity, it is capacity based. What the direction that we're heading to is what is called a federated design. And so I can scale out my controllers, I can scale up my storage, and then I can achieve a single management pane to go across all these shares, regardless of where the namespace exists. Well, at that case, you would pick a namespace to point your data to, but from a management perspective, I would be able to search and manage both from this single platform. So we're building a management layer above it to be able to see everything underneath it. Yeah, a little bit. We just had a conversation with my CTO about this, so it's coming soon. Typically, I'll kind of just mention how most of our users approach this solution. Is that, remember the first 3 questions? What do you know about your data? Which data do you consider sensitive and requires compliance? And how is your storage? Well, it's that second question is they said, okay, from a CISO perspective, and more importantly, the CFO, I need health insurance on this set of data. And so I will take this set of data and put it on there. And that tends to be a subset of the overall data. And so now what they get is daily reporting, activity tracking, the audit trails, the forensics on the data that meets all this, that requires all the security standards. That tends to be a smaller subset of the overall data. And then, of course, what we're moving towards is simply a scale out, scale up, or fan out design to federate indexing, searching, and then management overlay across all these subsystems. Does that help? Okay. Great questions. Yeah.
We were talking in other sessions about how the metadata inside the header and image or whatnot would make up important information.
Right.
Beyond reading kind of the classic file ownership information that is not written, we also running those queries on, let's say, unexpected metadata.
Yes. 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 We can see that. We're reading through the entire metadata. Absolutely. We're reading through the metadata, the header, and typical MFT properties, the whole list of attributes there as well. So yeah, we've you mentioned GPS. That's another music, audio, video files. Being able to read some of the encoding embedded in there. There's lots of particular interesting use cases that pop up. Yeah. All right. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.